I want to preface my comments tonight by saying that I am going to talk about some economics and some politics, but I'm not really properly or formally trained in these areas. I'm merely a community organizer and a teacher. Sarah Palin might disapprove of me talking about these issues, but I'm going to go ahead anyway because the recent election, I think, showed to the entire nation that we're ready for a huge change in this country and ready, electing the first black president in a country founded on slavery. Absolutely incredible step forward for everybody. It showed that the Bradley effect was buried. It showed, I think, that the myth of Joe the plumber kind of got flushed. And Sarah Palin's back hunting caribou and keeping an eye on Russia over there. And best of all, we no longer have that babbling idiot to deal with for years. We have a president who could put a sentence together. And let me tell you, black people are happy right now. Hang around. Am I right? Black people right now are in the streets. The day of the election, I think people probably were out there. In the streets. There was thousands around the country. You should go on YouTube and look at what Harlem looked like the night that Obama got elected. Tens of thousands of people in the streets. Right here in Seattle, we had 5,000 people climbing lampposts and screaming to the heavens that a change is coming. And so I think this all happened in a country where when Obama was born, millions of African Americans didn't even have the right to vote, and it took a massive decades-long civil rights movement to secure those rights. And I think with Obama's landslide victory, winning slave states like Virginia, winning more white votes than even Bill Clinton, I think we can say that a large change has already taken place in this country. And we have to realize that a dramatic change in attitudes has occurred right now. And of course, the right wing, though, is going to say, well, racism's over now, right? We have a black president. Affirmative action rules in the United States, and that's the end of the story. But I think you only had to see the sort of John McCain white power rallies that were held around the country to know that's not true, right? Did people see any of the clips? Of like that woman who jumps on stage and says, "He's a Muslim," right? Talking about Obama. You heard what John McCain replied? He said, "No, he's not. He's a good family man." Being racist on two fronts with one comment. Amazing. The fact is that 30% of both black and Latino children live in poverty today in America. 23% of African Americans have no health coverage. Black infant mortality rate is twice that of whites. And black unemployment is twice that of whites. And I taught in Washington, D.C. for several years before coming out here. And every single one of the students that I taught in my classroom had a father or an uncle behind bars, right? And we know that those things are far from being over. So we know racism is still alive and well in this country. But I think that there is an important change that has taken place with Obama in the White House that allows us to have a more sophisticated discussion about racism in this country. It allows us to have a more precise discussion about where it actually comes from, to see that it's far more insidious and complex than just personal prejudices of individual white people. It's far worse than just the ideas in people's heads. That millions of people can vote for a black person to govern this country because they're ready for a change, but yet the institutions that maintain racism are still there. So the court system and the prison system that Bible laid out is still intact, right? So right now there are more black men behind bars in the United States than were on plantations during slavery in 1840. And then in Seattle, we have, you know, not exactly a chocolate city. We have 50% of the marijuana arrests are of black people, right? 50% of the marijuana arrests in Seattle are of black people. Now be honest. White people smoke some weed. Right? Be honest about that. That something doesn't add up. And I think what it shows us is that racism goes far beyond personal hatreds of white people, but it's woven into the very fabric, the institutions of our country. So that even if there's a sea change in attitudes where people are open to having a black person govern the entire nation, these institutions remain. And I think that some of the cases that outlined tonight really show that well. But I think, you know, in this struggle for the better world that we're talking about, the one thing that we should be thanking John McCain for something, and I think that's actually popularizing socialism in an ironic way. I mean, did people see the speeches where he was going across the country saying, Barack Obama is the redistributionist in chief, right? A socialist who wants to spread the wealth around, right? And millions of people had to ask themselves, well, if he's a socialist, if he, you know, is a socialist because he wants the rich to pay a little bit more in taxes, then what's wrong with socialism, right? And I have to say, though, that it did come as a bit of a surprise to people in the International Socialist Organization that Obama was one of us. I mean, first of all, we didn't see him at any of the meetings. But second, I think that his economic policy is closer to Warren Buffett than Karl Marx. And I think that you only have to look at his chief economic advisor, Jason Furman, to see that. I mean, unfortunately, Jason Furman is best known to the labor movement as the person who wrote a book in 2005 calling Walmart a progressive success story. Right? The company that enslaves people in China and denies them health care here in the United States, right? So when we're thinking about the sorts of radical economic changes that are needed right now, and that's who's advising Obama, we have to be skeptical. And I think that, you know, we're in the middle right now of what the Washington Post and many other newspapers and economists have called the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression. It was fueled by the housing bubble bursting and the subprime mortgage crisis, but it didn't just affect the AIGs of the world. It didn't just affect Fannie and Freddie Mac or Bear Stearns or these other huge investment banks that have collapsed now. I mean, if people saw the newspaper today, the unemployment rate is up to around 6.5%. Another 200,000 jobs were lost last month alone in this country. And I think, you know, the economists and big business owners and CEOs and corporate heads, they scratched their head, you know, and they were just all shocked that this system that's hell-bent on profit could ever go wrong, right? And now I think that even Alan Greenspan, who was the chief economist for the United States for year after year after year, right, he had to admit that he didn't understand how that we got into this mess, and he thought that the free market would regulate itself somehow that, you know, if rich people just trying to grab as much as they possibly could would just work out forever. And, you know, it's the same people that sabotage the economy, right, with this casino game of speculation, you know, and hedge funds and all these derivatives. They walk away after sabotaging the economy with floating to the ground on golden parachutes of billions of dollars, and it's absolutely despicable. It's really amazing. There's James Kane was the CEO of Bear Stearns, and when they collapsed, he walked away with $1.3 billion. And